Hey, welcome back, people. This is Kua speaking. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to talk about some modeling techniques that would help you sufficiently model certain types of objects during the creation process of the concept art and so on. So what I have here is just a quick breakdown of the typical tools and techniques that we will be using. The first method that I thought of to discuss is essentially using the projection on a 3D model and then using that projection to cut the faces accordingly and then extract certain details. This is a very good type of workflow if you were to create a very customized design or shape, and it would otherwise take you quite a bit of time to model a certain shape. Further down, we have soft selection. This is just a general technique that I felt like everyone should know that allows you to kind of morph a shape just by pulling one or a set of components, and it has some sort of a nice fall off radius to it so that the shape kind of morphs with it and not you individually moving one vertex at a time. Additionally, we have extruding along a curve. Most people should know this technique purely because it's almost like a Swiss Army knife for creating objects, especially when you have a custom curve profile and you want to have the shape follow along that curve. Additionally, I will add a bit of modeling tool techniques that I feel like might be beneficial to everyone. And then a lot of people aren't using the nonlinear deformers enough. These are referring to like the bend deformers, the squash and stretch, the sine deformers, and so on. I also feel like it might be worth looking into the lattice deformer for quickly morphing a shape or a volume with a very simple kind of box shape profile on top of it. And then additionally, there are some NURBS techniques that I feel like it's worth knowing, not for the NURBS modeling essentially, but rather for actually extracting polygon shapes using the NURBS modeling tools. Okay, great. So furthermore, what I have here additionally on the other screen, let me just bring this into view. I have a few objects that I felt like that these type of objects would kind of make use of these techniques, and you guys can actually see it in action while I'm making these objects. You will see that I have some chairs. These chairs have a very simple design to them, very clean cut, and yet they've got some very nice overall profiles and designs that we can kind of look into how we can apply these techniques. For instance, if we look at the pipe, we can actually make use of the extrude along curve to get that shape done, and then we can use some lattice deformers or bend deformers to kind of create these custom curve profiles. We will also look into some edge modeling techniques that that might be worth checking out. Let's have a look at some of the other images. One of these type of bubble chairs, these are great for curve projection because essentially you have kind of a round dome or sphere, and then you have an opening that we can then cut into to kind of create the hollow inside. Furthermore, soft selection for the pillow, just to deform some of the shapes along the side of the pillow. There's just a side profile view of that same chair. Okay, and then finally I've got a couch here that I feel like it has some very cool looking designs to it and shapes to it. And we can definitely make use of the loft tool according to the NURBS modeling techniques. And we've got some custom shapes. We'll see how we can approach these during the modeling process, just to see how it's going to come out. So what I'm going to do is actually put up my reference on the other side of the screen, and I might bring some of it into Maya as well, just as a reference guide to, so that you guys can keep track of what I'm actually modeling. So first things first, let's actually do that. I'm going to go and just bring in an image plane into my perspective. And just bring this into view. And I'm going to quickly load in one of those images to start off with. I want to start off with the chair because this one has a lot of the techniques built into it. And I feel like this might be the easiest start at this point. I'm going to go to the image plane preferences, and I'm going to shrink down the image width just so that I'm going to bring this down, not too small, just enough so that you guys can actually see what I'm doing. And I'm going to move it off to the side. Let's do image center. Actually go to the channel box, that might be easier. Okay, so we have the image center. There's the offset, that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to move it to here, and during the modeling process you can actually constantly reference what I'm making, and I'll kind of talk you guys through this process. So first things first, let's break it down to the parts that I will be making. We're probably going to do the pipes separate, and then we're going to do the setting part second, and then we can make the back part as a third shape. And additionally, we might be adding the bridge across the chair, and then some rivets to keep everything together. So it's broken down into essentially 4, maybe 5 parts. And if we kind of keep that in mind, we can keep track of our modeling process. So first things first, let's start off with this basic profile shape. I've mentioned I'm going to use some edge modeling techniques, so that would be my first, I guess, go-to kind of thing. But let's tackle the pipes first. I'm going to do the actual wiring around the chair. I'm going to tackle that using a basic curve profile. I'm going to do that using the Create EP Curve tool. And inside the options, I'm going to make sure it's set to 3 cubic. Simple reason for that is the cubic or the degree types allow you to create more of an average round corner or very sharp kind of edged corners. So 3 cubic will allow you to place 3 points before it starts rounding out the shape. And if I change the type to something like linear, then it's always going to be a harsh cut. Just something to keep in mind if you guys ever need to do one or the other. Okay, great. So I'm going to do a 3 cubic. I'm going to close the options, don't need that anymore. And I'm going to start drawing it out from the front view. I'm going to create that arc in the front. So I'm going to make use of the grid snap. And I'm going to grid snap a few of these points just to kind of come up with the profile. I'm only going to do 1/2. Simple reason, just because I feel like I can always go back and just mirror the other side. So I am creating the one profile of the bend at the top, and I'm going to keep creating 2 or 3 curves just to make all the parts and bends, and after that I can actually use the edit curves tool to rebuild it and actually create a one continuous curve out of the shape. So I've got the back part from here going back there. I am going to add its curvature as well. So I'm going to pull back on it. I'm going to use the rotate tool just to give it some curvature. And in fact, I'm going to go take it the other way. There we go. Rotate it this way. Good. I'll bring this forward as well. Great. So now I've got a simple profile for this. And I'm going to continue with another curve down. And I'm going to go back to create EP curve. And from my side view, I'm going to do curve snaps. I'm going to click C, hold down C rather, and then click on the curve and then drag down. That way I'm actually snapping to the curve and actually make sure those points are meeting up. So as I'm going down, I am constantly looking at the reference and examining how I'm building this. Okay, so I'm placing some points closer to each other just to keep that curvature from collapsing in on itself. And I'm going back this time. Okay, and I'm going to stop there with this particular curve and just refine the shapes. I'm going to grab these 2 points and I'm going to move them forward. I'm going to do the same thing with these because I need more curvature. Yeah, that feels a lot better. Bring this forward as well. Okay, cool. So a little bit more to refine. Great, so I've got that. And the next step for me is to create another curve. So I'm going to hit Y on the keyboard, and that's going to reactivate the last tool. You can see I'm back into the EP curve tool, holding down C. I'm going to click and drag on the curve and snap to that edge. From the top this time, I'm going to keep drawing the profile out and end up right at the center. Press enter. I'm going to refine these points, make sure it's looking nice and clean. Don't want it to be too sharp. I'm going to bend this a bit more until I get the look that I like. Almost there. Great stuff. That's looking nice. Okay, cool. So now that I have all the points or the parts that make up the bend, obviously I could have made this all out of one curve, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to create them in parts and then show you guys how we can actually combine them to become one curve. One other thing that we have to keep in mind is that when you create curves, they have a start and an end. And when you attach one part of a curve to its start and another part of a different curve to its end, they're not flowing in the same direction. So what we need to do is make sure that the curves are all pointing in the same direction, as if I made the curve as a one continuous shape. So the easiest way for you to do this would be to essentially go to the component mode of the curve, and you can actually see that there's a little open square box on the end, or rather the start of your EP curve. And that's usually indicating that that's the point of the curve that's starting, okay? And if I continue doing that, you can see this one is also starting from there, but this one is going down. So what's going to happen is Maya's going to try and combine these two curves together, and it's actually going to try and attach the start and an end of a curve together, not a start and a start. Thus, it's going to actually try and bridge from this point to that point, and not from this point to this point. Just to kind of show you guys what I mean by that is if I have two of these curves selected, and I go to the Surfaces menu, and I open up the Edit Curves, and I go to Attach Curves, and I just apply. Usually what's going to happen is the opening part of the curve, well, we're actually lucky this time, and it didn't do that. So we're very lucky. But typically what will happen is when they try and attach, it's actually going to attach in a very odd manner. So let's see. Attach, open and close. There we go. That's exactly what I was going to say. So trying to open and close the curves where the start and the end doesn't meet at the same point, and that's when it freaks out and it doesn't really attach like it's supposed to. So instead what I'm going to do is actually use the Attach Curves option, and this menu pops up, and you can choose, do you want to connect them straight ahead, or do you want to blend them? But before we do any of this, I want to show you guys how we can actually make sure that the start and the end of the curve are all pointing in the same direction. So for this one, I'm going up. So I'm going to reverse this as if it's pointing down. I'm going to do that via Edit Curves and just say Reverse Curve Direction. This way, when you click on the curve, you can actually see that now the start is on this side and the end is over here, which is great because this one starts here and it ends over there, and as well as this one starts here and ends over there. So it's now all flowing in the same direction. So what I'm going to do, go back to component mode and have all three of these curves selected. I'm going to go to Edit Curves and then say Attach Curves. What's going to happen now is Maya is going to evaluate a brand new curve and then trying to match that according to the actual chord length and the parameters that we have on the older three curves, and it generates a brand new curve for us. It doesn't always line up 100%, but sometimes you just have to do a bit of manual work just to refine that a bit, but it's really not that big of a deal at all. Great, so now that I have the curve, let's say we want to refine the new attached curve. If I open up the outline, it's going to be slightly more obvious. You have original curve 1, 2, and 3, and then you have curve attach. This is now the brand new evaluated curve. So I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to go to, I'm going to refine it a bit more so we have slightly more points to kind of match the length of the curve. Like over here, if I go into the curve control point, there's no real additional point for me to refine the shape with. I either have to pull this one up or I have to pull this one down just to compensate for the shape. Instead of what I'm going to do is I'm going to first make sure I clear the history so that the connection between the original curves will be broken. So that I can do via Edit, Delete by Type, History. And that's going to get rid of the history, so I can essentially now either get rid of the old curves or, in my case, I'm just going to hide it. Additionally, I'm going to go to the curve itself. I'm going to right click on it and then go to Curve Point. So what this means is now I can click and drag anywhere on the curve where I want to add additional points, and then once I let go, it actually generates a virtual placement holder for where I can then add control points or editable points for the curve. And then what I can do is if I hold down Shift and then right mouse button, click and hold, you'll see there's an Insert Knot option. So once I do that, it's actually going to generate an extra control vertex for me to go then and manipulate. So this is great. That's exactly what I was looking for. So now I can go and take this point and then pull it out a bit more just to match the profile of the curve. So if you guys ever need to do that, there you go. Now you know how to do that. Great. So I've got the additional points. I'm going to hide them. I'm going to have my new curve selected, and I'm just going to do an extra bit of manipulation on it so that it closely matches the design of my original concept. I'm going to pull this down, and I'm going to straighten this out. There we go. There we go. Great stuff. Now we're getting somewhere. So now that I have the curve profile, I'm going to have this guy mirrored across to the other side. And then after that, we're going to attach that so that we can then build our profile geometry for the actual pipe. Simple way of mirroring this across. First things first, we need to make sure that the start and the end point is perfectly aligned together. So I'm going to select both the editable points, and I'm going to make sure I scale them to the dead center of the scale tool. This way, when this mirrors across, I know that my top and my bottom will meet up at the center where it's supposed to be. And then I'm also going to make sure that it is lined up to the grid, which it is. So no extra editing work there. And I'm going to go and create a duplicate of this, holding down Control and then pressing D. It creates a duplicate object, and I'm going to mirror this across the axes of the mirror direction. In this case, you can see it's the X. So I'm going to go and take my scale X, press -1, and that's going to be a negative copy of the same one, but on the opposite side. Great stuff. Now that we have this, I can see that I need a bit of extra refinement work, but I think we're good for now. I don't want to spend too long on the detailing of the wire. It's just the concept or the idea behind it. So I'm going to have both of these selected, and this time I'm going to do an attach again. So it's going to build me a brand new curve. In fact, that cleaned it up very nicely for me, so I don't have to have that much refinement anyways. Awesome. So now I'm going to take my newly attached curve, and I'm going to clear the history on that and hide the two originals again. So we have a perfectly clean curve ready to be extracted. It's got the same equal amount of points, and you can see the start and end is now perfectly aligned together. So the start comes this way, the curve goes all the way around and comes back in on itself on the side. I'm going to make sure I scale these two together so that they're right on top of each other. Okay. And what's going to happen now is I'm going to use this curve as a profile to extrude along. So you can use polygons, you can use NURBS, anything that you feel like it's useful. I'm going to use the polygons. I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to start off with a polygon cylinder that is within the dimensions and width that I want. I'm going to start off with, let's say, something like, I guess 20 subdivisions will work. That shouldn't be a problem. But for simplicity's sake, what I'm going to do is put this to 8, just to keep the geometry light. Additionally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap the pivot to the base of the cylinder. You can do that via holding down the D key. It allows you to go into pivot mode. I'm going to hold down V at the same time, and we're just going to middle mouse drag this until it snaps to the center of that vertex at the top. Then I'm going to rotate this guy 90 degrees on the z-axis. And so this is going to be my start position for the curve so that I can extrude it along that path. So I'm going to shrink this guy down a bit. It's still a bit too thick. There we go, that's a lot better. And then, with the new position of the pivot snapped to where it is now, I'm just going to do a modify freeze transform. Just get rid of the history or the information in the channels. And I'm going to snap my object to the curve now. So first we snap the pivot to the base of the object, and then we're going to snap it to the curve so that both of these are perfectly aligned. So you can do that via curve snapping. If you hold down C, it goes into snapping mode. As you can see, there's the curve snapping. If you hold it down and then middle mouse click on the curve and then drag, you can actually see it follows the path. So you want this to essentially start right at the base over here. And you can obviously check if it's nicely aligned. Slightly off a bit there. And I'm going to line it up right on the grid. And yeah, I'm good with that. Great stuff. So now I'm going to extrude this curve. And I'm going to extrude it using the face extrusion options. So in my 2015, they've divided everything up into columns, which is fine. But I'm just going to show you guys anyways. They've got edges, vertices, and faces. And we essentially want to extrude using faces mode. And in the options, you'll see there's a curve setting. You can either say none, selected, or generated. If you say selected, whatever curve you have selected after selecting the face component, it's going to use that curve to extrude along. If you say none, it's not going to ever allow you to extrude along curve. But if you say selected, generated, then it's going to build a very simple 3 or 4 point curve for you to manipulate the shape if you need to just do a very basic kind of bridge between certain parts. Just to keep that in mind for you guys. So again, edit, mesh, extrude, and then options. I'm going to leave it to default reset settings. I'm going to select the curve, and obviously we want to select the components that we want to extrude. So I'm going to go and select faces, and then I'm going to select the curve, and I'm going to do an extrude face component. So this time, instead of going to the menu at the top, I'm holding down Shift, right-clicking, and I'm going to extrude face. Cool. So now I've extruded, but nothing really happened. So essentially what's happening here is Maya is trying to extrude the shape, but it doesn't have enough divisions to actually look at the profile of the curve. And since the start and end is on the same spot, it just kind of looks like it did nothing. So we have to be aware of, as soon as we add additional components, Maya looks like it's freaking out. But if we zoom out, you can actually see it's trying to match the component divisions to the amount of edge length for the curve. So that helps definitely. So we need more points for this to work nicely. If I do 25, it's not enough. I do 50, that's looking a lot better already. And there's some cleanup work inside of here afterwards. But that's a typical thing if you have overlapping parts on a curve. And when the face of one object is crossing over the length of the curve. So I'm going to undo this just to show you guys what I mean. Like the width of the actual cylinder, it's a bit wide. I'm going to get rid of that. We're also going to get rid of this. And then just select these faces and then extrude. And then give you edge extrusion. So now the components will essentially match up a lot better at the center. All we have to do is just delete those inner faces and then kind of bridge across these components or even merge the vertices together. So that's looking neat. I'm liking this quite a bit. So I'm going to add, let's say 50, 55. Let's say 56. Let's do 60 rather. Yeah, that's looking neat. And I'm going to keep it there. So now I'm just going to go in, go to face mode, select those inner faces, press delete, and select both border edges on either side. And then just scale them together. If you scale them together, they're essentially lining up to the center. And now all I have to do is select the vertices and then merge the vertices. Edit mesh. Vertices, merge components. There we go. So once I do that, I usually press 3 just to see if it actually smooths out. And it doesn't really seem like the threshold is enough for it to merge properly. So what I'm going to do instead is actually increase the distance to 0.1. There we go. So there we go. Now it's just one merged component. Great stuff. Cool. So now we have a clean pipe. It's working for us. And I can actually go back into the stacked history using the radius, and using just changing the radius will allow us to shrink the pipe down a bit. And that gives me a nice refined tube so we can actually create the rest. The rest of it's going to go much, much faster now because the initial creation process takes a bit of time just to set up the shape. But once we have that set up, it's going to get really, really quick after this. I'm going to clear the history. A hotkey for that, Shift-Alt-D. That clears it up for me. I'm going to do a modify, freeze transform. And now we have the outer tubing. Outer tubing. There we go. So now I'm going to do the base of the chair. And this we can do via, let's say, the simple plane. I'm going to use a simple plane. Let's kind of match the width of this. Bring it into position. That's about there approximately. And I'm going to reduce the amount of input subdivisions. So I'm going to start off with something low like 3 just to keep it simple. And I'm going to start refining the shape a bit. I do feel like the chair is way too wide. So before we do anything, I'm going to get this to approximately there. So I'm going to go to component mode and then only select 1/2 and then turn on the reflection option in the move tool. So if you go into the move tool, if you double click on the move tool and you go down to where it says symmetry, I can go and say follow symmetry according to world, and then, or rather object. Just want to see if it's going to read properly. Yeah, let me do it the modeling toolkit way. I'm going to go to the modeling toolkit. I am going to select a single edge on that symmetry line, and then establish symmetry. I'm going to select 1/2. I'm just going to shrink it in a bit. I'm trying to be. Ah, there we go. That looks better. And deselect that. Deselect that. Bring it in a bit more. There we go. That's looking okay. The shape is not looking so nice here at the back. Just going to bring this back a bit more. There we go. Nice and clean. Good stuff. Something went a bit skew on the side, but we can fix that doing a mirror copy to the other side later if we need to. Okay, great. So let's get back to what I was going to do. I'm going to do some edge extrusion. Bring the shape down, make it smaller, make it slightly wider, and then I am going to, in fact, what I'm going to do is get rid of the additional components along this way, and I'm going to start it with a single plane, and then show you guys how we can kind of do this edge extrusion. So we can see the front is pulled down, something like that, facing down, and also slightly more forward, so about there, maybe not so much. Then I'm just going to do select the edge, hold down shift, and then as soon as I click on my move tool, it's going to use the extrude option for edge extrusion. And I'm going to go and pull out a second one, start pulling down a bit more. Now you can do this from the side view as well, just to make this slightly easier for us to see the profile. And I'm looking constantly at the reference. The back, I want to do an up direction. Just to undo that. Okay, there we go. Very simple design. And I'm going to space these out slightly more. I want to give it a bit more of a even curvature. Bring this guy back a bit more. There we go. So I'm happy with this. And now we just need a round shape. So the round shape is quite simple. We just need enough subdivisions along the length to give it some nice curvature. So what I'm going to do is actually shrink this in. And now I'm going to keep it there where it was and just give it some local subdivisions. So I'm going to go to Modeling Toolkit, Connect, and I'm going to add, let's say, 3 divisions. Let's say 2 for now. Don't know why that one didn't split properly. It's a bit weird. Sometimes things doesn't always go the way you expect it to. Okay. Quickly lining them, and then I'm going to start pulling out this profile to the back. Essentially, that's it. There's nothing really special to this particular shape. Bring this in to round it out a bit. Maybe a bit more. Great stuff. Whoopsie. Doesn't like that. Great. Okay, cool. The front, that should be nice and clean. I'm going to add 1 extra connection point, and I'm going to pull this out forward, so just to round out that profile in the front. And then there's a bit of a bow towards the inside to where you sit. So I'm going to select the edge ring down the center. I'm going to select the first edge, holding down shift, and then just double clicking, as that's going to select the ring for me. And I'm going to pull that down slightly, just a bit, not too much. We don't want it to overcompensate too much. Great stuff. So it's got some hard edges. We can quickly fix that by just softening the edges, the edge normals. And then we've got a good looking profile already. Additionally, I'm going to thicken it up, and that we can do using faces, selecting all the faces together, and then going to extrude faces, holding down shift, right click, face extrude, and then I'm just going to bring it out until we have some sort of thickness that we like. Nice, that's looking neat. I do feel like the shape is a bit too big, so I'm going to do modify center pivots. I'm just going to shrink it in a bit. There we go. slightly wider. Nice, great. Now for the back part, what I'm going to do is actually make use of the existing curves that we have on the pipe. And then just select a row of these. I'm going to do 1/2 just to keep things nice and clean. And then I can marry this across over to the other side, since I have a bit of a weird warping on this side. With those faces selected, I'm going to show you guys how we can do an edge extrusion, but instead of just extruding the edge of the face, I'm actually going to create a brand new copy of the existing faces using the duplicate face tool. This will allow me to generate a brand new set of faces. Just go to wireframe and shade it, so it's easier to see. And then I can use that to then kind of pull out the edges for this back part. And I'm just going to refine this until the shape and the design of it matches the concept. Okay, so this can be up and back a bit more. And additionally, I'm going to select that, do another extrude, and just kind of pull this back so it looks like it's wrapping in and around. Great stuff. That's looking really nice. Okay, I am going to straighten the edge and then make sure it's perfectly snapped to the center of the grid. And then I'm going to use the mirror geometry tool. The mirror geometry tool is essentially a great way for us to copy the geometry from the one side to the other side, and then at the same time merging the components and combining it as a whole. So you can find this mirror tool. Let me see where it is. There we go, mesh. And then we have the mirror options, geometry. And what I'm going to do is turn on the mirror direction to be -x. This way, it's going to mirror to the opposite side of what I currently have. So in this case, we are working on the negative side. So we want to keep it on the positive side. And it's going to merge with the original. So now we've got a clean combined mesh and no issues at all. Same thing that we did to the base, we will be extruding the faces. I'm going to clean some of this up. It feels like I don't need these edges. That's much better, it's less. Maybe let's keep it for now. That's good enough. I'm going to go to face mode, select the faces, and then do an edge extrude. And just give it the same kind of width as we have with this base. It's a bit less, something like that. There we go. Great stuff. Cool. So I'm going to pull this down. So it feels like this guy fits higher at the top, somewhere along there. And I'm going to refine these shapes. This time I'm going to refine the shape using soft select. So we haven't talked about that yet. So soft selection is essentially a quick way of manipulating a radius influenced area so that the shape deforms in a more organic type of way. So Modeling Toolkit has some soft selection tools. So we can turn that on. So as soon as you turn it on, you can essentially increase the radius value here. If I type in 10, you can see it's spreading out. So if I type in 50, it's going to spread out even further. So you interactively, if you hold down B and you click and drag, you're increasing and decreasing this radius on the fly. So B for Barney, if you will, and that will allow you to manipulate it. So wherever you click, whatever type of component, whether it's edge, face, or vertices, it's going to allow you to kind of manipulate any of those in a soft selection type of manner. So before I do that, I'm going to toggle that on and off by just tapping B. I'm going to establish the symmetry line, and then now I can essentially do both sides at the same time. So that leaves me with a lot less work later on. Great stuff. Okay, spread this out a bit more. There we go. That's looking nice. Pull this down. Grabbing these guys over here. Almost done. Just refining this. The cool thing is soft selection does not only work for movie component mode, but also scale. So if I need to quickly widen the base, I can easily do that just by scaling it. Okay, so we're getting there. I want to spread this out a bit more. Grab these guys, pull them in. Something like that. Great. I'm happy with the results so far. Good stuff. Good stuff, good stuff. Great. So now that we have the design laid out, essentially all we have to do now is to add the cross bridge and then some rivets. And then we're essentially done with this shape. So we're progressing pretty good so far. So the cross bridge is a very simple shape. I don't have particular reference for it, so I'm going to kind of make up something out of my head. It essentially looks like it's some kind of angle brackets. It goes right across, and then it has a little bit of a taper where it attaches to the pipe. So what I'm going to do is just model one side and then kind of see how we can kind of manipulate the shape and then mirror it across to the other side. Cool, so now I've got this. I'm going to kind of place it in position. Around about there should be good. Kind of connect it there. And we'll rotate it later. Bring up some vertices. Taper this in. Actually, bring it in even more. Doing the face extrude, pull it out, refine the shape, refine, and then do another extrude and pull it out straight. And this time, I'm going to pull it out all the way to half. So I'm going to go to wireframe mode by pressing 4 on the keyboard. Pull this out, snap it to the grid, up to there, and then I'm going to get rid of this face, and then use the same kind of mirror geometry tool technique to mirror this across. Great stuff. So now that we have both sides, I am going to establish its symmetry line so that I am now changing the shape of this guy in a symmetrical way. So let's pull all of this forward. Great. And I'm going to rotate this. That should be good. I'm going to use not world space but object space so that I can pull it in the same direction as the object direction. You can do that by going to the move tool and just changing its space type in the settings, tool settings, all the way at the top to object mode. Quick way is holding down W, left click, hold, and then choose which space you want to change. That should be good for now. I'm happy with that. Squeeze it in until it meets up. Now, finally for the rivets. These are going to be very simple in design. I'm not going to make it too complex. I'm going to start off with a sphere. I'm going to reduce the amount of input divisions. Something like 8 should be good. I'm going to delete one half, and then we're just going to flatten the shape. Good stuff. Together with that, you can go and add some additional detail, like the base of where essentially the washer will be, and then just kind of extrude those faces as well. Something like that. That's good enough. Nothing too complex. I am going to soften these edges so that they blend in nicely. So you can do that via double-clicking the edges, or the ones you want to soften. And I'm going to do it over here as well. And just want to deselect any that I don't want to have affected. Great. And I'm just going to go to soften. Great stuff. Now it looks like a rivet. Awesome. So I'm going to take this guy, shrink it down. It's already nice and small. And now, to get this to match 100%, I'm going to use Snap Faces Together tool. So how this works is I'm going to use a certain face to align to a different face using its normals. So first things first, we need to cap this or fill the hole. You can easily do that by selecting the border edge and then just shift right clicking and say fill hole. That's going to quickly fill it up for you. And then with that together, I can go to modify and then snap together tool. So I'm going to pick the normal that I want to have aligned and then pick another normal to where I want to have it snapped. And now, once I press enter, it's going to align the actual normal of this object with the normal of the other object. Sometimes it doesn't line up 100%. You'll have to do slightly hand positioned work, but it's really not that much of work. Great stuff. So now that I have this aligned, I'm just going to, let's have a look. I'm going to add one here, and one there for now. Maybe one down here and here. So I'm going to duplicate this guy, pull it off, and do exactly the same cheat. I'm going to press Y to go back to the previous tool. I'm going to sample the normal. I'm going to pick the face that I want to snap it to, and done. Duplicate that as well, pull it off, Y. There we go. One in the dead center, somewhere around here. And then I'm just going to select all both of these on the side. Make sure you only have that selected. And then I'm going to group it. Yeah, the reason why I'm grouping it is group allows the pivot to go to the base, and I can use the -1x to kind of mirror this across to the other side. So that's a nice technique to kind of move it from one point to another. But before we do that, we need to duplicate the group and then do that to the duplicate group. Otherwise, we're just mirroring the ones that's already there. Cool, we've got them aligned to the other side, but you'll see they're black. The reason why they are black is because I've turned on or rather off an option called two-sided lighting. So by default, Maya has the two-sided lighting turned on, and I don't like that purely because I want to see the back side of my normals or see which side of my normals are pointing towards the camera. So if they're black, they're pointing inwards towards the object. If they're pointing outwards, you can see it as a shaded side. So I turn this off and I can see any mirrored object flips its normals incorrectly. And you can quickly get rid of that by going to normals and say, freeze transform, normals, and then reverse. So that's going to quickly flip them around for me, and I've got everything sorted exactly to where I want it to be. Additionally, I want to make sure these guys at least match to where they're supposed to be going in. Something like that. And these should be good. Nice. Good stuff. Okay, that's about it for this particular object. In the next object, we will be using some curve projection and then kind of refine the shape after that. I just want to quickly soften the normals on these. And then additionally, obviously, you can press 3 to smooth it out. Now, before we actually jump to the next object, I'm going to add supporting edges, clean up the history, and just do a bit of editing work on this guy so you guys can actually see a much cleaner version of the final chair. These are the little steps that really makes the work that you do just that much better for presentation purposes. So I've got a very simple topology, simple design, but if I press 3, it rounds out very ugly. So what I'm going to do is try and maintain the volume of the object. You can do it a few ways. You can either duplicate or rather add supporting edges to where you want to maintain the curvature, or you can add crease edges. So I'm going to show you guys how we can use crease edges to maintain the volume. So crease edges works this way. Essentially, you select all the components that you want to have creased or sharpened. And then once you have those components selected, all you have to do is go to your, I think it's under, let's see. I always move this stuff around. There we go. It's under Mesh Tools, Crease Tool. So when you go to the Crease Tool, it asks you select the components to crease and then middle mouse drag. So once I middle mouse drag, you'll actually see you've got these border edges, these thickened up edges. You can't really see the results of what's happening, but if you press 3 to go into smooth mode, you'll see by middle mouse clicking and dragging, I'm actually adding a lot more maintenance to the curvature of the surface so that the profile of this object does not collapse in on itself. And that's exactly what we need. We want to have these edges nice and sharp. So that's definitely something that I want. Okay, great stuff. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some smoothness to it. So I'm going to go to Shape, Mesh, Shape, and then Smooth. So the cool thing is the Smooth tool actually respects the creasing, and it adds the divisions in between so that the shape looks identical to the lower poly version, but it has much more refined edges. So that's nice and clean. I love this. This is super, super clean. Great. Same thing to this guy. I am going to select this. I'm going to select all the edges that I need. Right. Have all this selected. There we go. And then the ones that's in the front and the back. Front and back on this side as well. There we go. And I'm also going to tighten up the curvature on this one. Go to Y, or rather just go to Mesh Crease Tool, press 3 to smooth it out, and then middle mouse drag. There we go. So the further you pull it, the sharper the crease. So that's nice, I like that. Cool. So now that we have this, I am going to add a bit of supporting edges along the inside. I'm going to add something like an insert edge loop. And there we go. And I'm going to do smooth this time using the shift right click menu, smooth. So now I'm adding additional faces, and it is respecting the topology creasing, and it looks super clean. That's nice. Love that. Finally, obviously we have some work to do on the pipe. So I'm going to isolate that. I'm going to delete the 1/2. And I'm going to make sure these edges are nice and clean, aligned to the grid. There we go. And my pivot is at the base. I'm going to do mesh and then mirror geometry. That looks nice and clean, perfectly aligned to where it's supposed to be. And then finally, I'm just going to do a mesh, or rather, edit mesh, and then smooth. Where is this again? Mesh, smooth, there we go. Perfect. I'm going to add additional 2 divisions. So just by doing that, we can see that we've made the shape a lot more smoother. And for presentation purposes, this is ideal. This is exactly what we need. For this shape, we can do the same kind of creasing technique. Okay, I want to maintain all the edges that you feel like needs to be hard edged, that you don't want to have collapsing in on itself. Great. And now it's just a matter of shift right click and then crease tool. That's another shortcut way of approaching it. So pressing 3, there we go. There we go. Cool stuff. And then finally add a bit of smoothness to it. Say 3 divisions. There we go. Good. Hyper clean. And we are ready for action. I'm going to clean up, get rid of the unnecessary curves, groups, anything that you don't want to have part of the chair. I am also going to get rid of the grouping on the geometry, those unnecessary groups for the rivets, and I am going to group everything as my final chair group, and we are done with this object. All nice and clean, 100% perfect. Okay, just want to see. Yeah. Rename that again, chair group. Perfect. Cool. So I'm going to stop the lesson for this particular chair and then continue with the next lesson where we actually go into projecting curves onto surfaces. So see you in the next one.